All right, guys. So I put together, I know I might have mentioned this previously. Um, One last we discussed about foot health. So I'm gonna establish some premises. Give me a second. Present. Can you guys see that? All right, cool. Basically, I'm gonna establish some premises with foot health. The What I'm trying to do today is to educate us on our foot on some principles or philosophies about getting our foot into a healthier state that eventually translates to other parts of our body because our foot are essentially our foundation. Now, we're going to get into a part whereby it's going to be like some lifestyle changes and some decisions that you have to make, whether even considering making those lifestyle changes apply to you or not, and what the benefits would be if you were interested in procuring them. Because a lot of people are like, oh, you should go keto, you should do this, you should become vegan, without really considering whether it's relevant to you or not. It might be great for me, but it might not be useful for you at all. So even though it's something that is healthy to do, it might not be healthy for you. So going into foot health, I want everybody to look at their toes and just wiggle your toes. Just just wiggle your toes. Try to wiggle the small ones. Try to wiggle them individually. Just see how much mobility you have with actually moving those toes. Anybody can move single ones at the same time. Like you can move your big ones or your little ones. Pretty difficult, right? So the reason I'm asking you to do that is a lot of the times, since we become adults, we don't really think about moving our toes or wiggling our toes or the impacts of our toe stability. So a fun fact is back in the old days for escaped slaves, what they used to do is cut off the big toe. So you can't run or you actually don't have enough stability to be as like anything explosive in your foot. Your big toe is super powerful. It's like an anchor. It anchors into the ground and it helps propel the foot. So we'll get into a little bit of that, but your foot, your toes on your foot provide overall stability. So we're going to look at a couple of, feet. So excuse the images. Yes. So get ready. All right. So far left, we got a baby's foot, right? So why do I have a baby's foot here? Does anybody know why?
Because it's
It's so
precious.
cute.
It's an
That's a
added benefit, I would say.
Yeah, that's a good one that I didn't think about. But we'll come back to why later. So let's jump over to the next feet or next foot, I should say. So this is somebody else's foot, pink, whatever. Does anybody know what physical condition they have on their foot?
Bunyan.
Bunions. Great. We're going to go down to the next foot. Does anybody knows whose foot this is? Or allegedly.
LeBron James.
I was just gonna say that.
Foot.
That's what his foot looks like. It's kind of gross.
And does anybody know what the last foot is?
Someone that walks around barefoot all the time. Those look
Nope.
strong. Those look like some strong toes.
Those looks like some monster feet, right? So the reason I'm showing you this is we have somebody that started out life, which is the anatomy that you're giving of how your foot should be. And if we're going to dissect this, notice how that foot is more spread out this way, like narrow at the bottom and the heels and wider at the top. Which when you're thinking of a baby, they have no life input, no environmental input into the shape of their foot. So generically, most people's feet should be more like that than the two middle foot. Now let's get to the other one. For the person that has bunion, this most of the time is genetic, right? If you do have bunions, does that mean you're terrible health or blah, blah, blah? No, they can have a surgical procedure and there's non-surgical procedures to treat bunion. But the challenge often is some people are only aware of a surgical procedure and only aware of like, okay, the doctor like says, oh, you have bunions, I can't wear any shoe, blah, blah, blah. And the doctor goes, yeah, we can just shave your bone. Happened to a friend of mine. I was like, once I learned about it, I was like, dude, you could have probably gone around getting your bone shaved and hobbling for 6 months. And then the other part that you don't get is anytime you have a procedure like that done, if you don't take your mobility seriously, you've essentially handicapped yourself with your range of motion after a procedure because you couldn't move that foot for or that toe or that foot for about 6 months. And if you don't work through, doing the PT and all that, then it's like that big toe has limited range of motion, which could cause other problems going up your foot. So we'll talk about that. So Vincent mentioned the far right picture. This person is a monster foot. They've been walking around barefoot a lot. So this is a consequence of that, meaning they've required more out of their foot in terms of the natural formation, which is why it's wider at the top, fatter toes, they look stronger. The whole foot metatarsals are stronger. And we'll get into what those are. Now, for a professional athlete like LeBron, who still plays on a high level, but yet his toes look like that, that is a consequence of his environment and what he does for a profession. The kind of shoes he wears, practicing 6 to 8 hours a day in that kind of what foot health nuts called a cast. They think of shoes as like a cast for your feet. So we're not going to get into the nut, but I'm just trying to shed some light on how this plays across, a bunch of people's feet. So we're going to this. Does anybody outside of Randy know how many bones are in our foot? You can try to count. I don't think this
It's
picture
like 250, 225, 200. I don't know. I forgot.
That's a lot of bones.
I'd take a wild guess.
It's like 20, right?
It's nowhere in the hundreds.
Dang
Zach's
it.
closer, but
85.
it's too high. So there's half of what Zach said. There's 26 bones in your foot, right? And if we're looking at just from side perspective, we got your toes here, right? You have your toes have joints, obviously. And we're not going to go into all the ligaments and whatever. I'm not going to bore you with that. You have your midfoot, metatarsals, right? You have your heel. And then you got your foot bone. Obviously back here, your ligament, your Achilles, and all the other ligaments that hold it. So now when we look at the right picture, you can actually see the muscle striation. So we saw the guy with the super buff feet. So you can imagine how much bigger his muscles are that pull each of those toes. And if you notice, those muscle striations go all the way up the anterior compartment. So this is just from an anatomy perspective, right? What your foot entails. And when we think about our foot is the only part of our body connected to the ground. And it's essentially our foundation. Like, if you think about a building, right? If you're building a skyscraper, you want your skyscraper to have really strong foundation. And it starts at the foot. So speaking of foundation, we can see from looking at our foot alone and how this kind of goes up, right? From the foot, it's connected by muscles, right in the anterior right here. And you also have your Achilles, which is your tendon that's pulling on your calf muscles as well as your heel, right? Giving you the ability to perform your movements, your explosiveness, your, flexion and all of that. And then you also have all the lateral muscles that support the rest of the foot going all the way up to the knees. So this is as far up as we're gonna go, but if there's something wrong here, what generally happens that I learned from my PT is it could start to happen here. You could start to feel it here. And if you don't, you could start to feel it here. If there's something weak. And if it's not here, you could start to feel it here. And if it's not here, it could go all the way up to your hip or something. And that's just kind of how the body works, because a lot of the times your body, well, not a lot of the times, our body compensates. right? It likes to compensate. We're great adapters. The human body is a very great adapting machine. So if something is wrong, it's going to adapt. Now, the question is, if it adapts too long, is it to your benefit or to your detriment if you don't adjust? And a lot of the times we're not aware of that. So this is just a short video that I'm going to play, right? From can you guys hear this? I don't think you're going to be able to. You can hear it?
No.
Oh, okay. Give me 1 second. Jeez. Let me get this playing. I guess it doesn't put an audio in there. Anyway. Well,
You could always just send the link to the video in the chat or the WhatsApp chat.
Right. Let me see if this works. What's sad about it is YouTube. Let's do this. All right. This should work.
Something doesn't quite fit.
There we go.
A normal foot shape today is not our natural foot shape. Shoes have distorted our feet in the name of fashion. Feet were made to feel. Shoes have made them numb. Maximalist design fighting the foot's minimalist needs. The short-term comfort of foam and air is having a long-term effect on our health. If feet cannot feel, feet cannot function, and we cannot move. The last thing the shoe industry thinks about is your feet. We must uncover this shoe-spiracy, reclaim our feet, reinstate our health, reconnect with what makes us human. Think feet first.
Gotta get out of the shoe-spiracy.
So I'm not here to convince you about all the shoe-spiracy, but that's just it's a company I really like that makes minimalist shoes, and we can get into that later. But if you heard a little bit of what they talked about, I'm gonna try to address that in the 10 minutes that we have. But so they talked about how, oh, what is going on here? They talked about how like the modern shoe has impacted your foot. This is not my picture, it's from Instagram. So it's somebody I follow, the Foot Collector, so they get their shout out. So when you're wearing a shoe that isn't in generally has more heel support, so ladies are more familiar with this in heels, what tends to happen is, if we're starting from a top left picture, your Achilles gets shorter. Because if you're always wearing shoes that are elevated, they feel comfortable. And the challenge is we've done this for 20 something, 30 something, 40 something years of our lives. And changing it back is a process, right? Going from heel supported shoes to no heel support on the bottom is not what I'm recommending, but I'm just explaining what the current state of how that affects. So shortening the length of the calf muscle is what tends to happen because your Achilles aren't pulling on those muscles. So if we remember back to the first few pictures I showed, we showed how like it went from the foot and all the way off to the calf and towards the knees. So that's a consequence. Also, right here, you can see that there's tension, right? This is what this person is saying. So if you're actually reading it, I'm not going to read it. They're just saying that in this position of the foot, the way the shoe is shaped creates tension because not only does it have a heel lift, it has a toe raise. Now, generically, why shoe companies try to do that is a lot of people heel strike when they run. So they try to put enough cushion and they try to force your foot into the position of a midfoot strike. And then they try to give you that toe raise so that you roll. Is there anything wrong with that? Absolutely not. But what's the challenge? The challenge is if your foot is in this position enough, what you're telling your body is you're telling your body, hey, I no longer need to develop strength in this areas. And your body is just going to let the shoe take over. And eventually you can't do anything without the shoe. So you hear a lot of people that are like, oh man, I need the shoe to like play effectively or great. Essentially what they're telling you is they're so used to the shoe that without it, their body doesn't know how to do it themselves. And it's a real thing. So if we look at the bottom picture, so this is a flat shoe, right? And the term used is this has zero drop. Zero drop meaning you can have some cushion at the bottom of your shoe, which is just the thickness. But in general, the distance between this part, the midfoot, the striking part, and your cushion and your heel and your cushion is generically zero, right? It's on the same lane. It's on the same plane, or if we're going to use that term. And what does that do for you? It allows for a much more natural cow stretch, natural stretch in your Achilles, and it helps strengthen all the muscles that are in the foot, as well as reducing tension that normally would occur from wearing this type of shoe that we've seen on the top half, if that makes sense. Any questions there?
Is that a call out to Nike? Are they trying to bash Nike there, or?
Well, I guess, yeah. Because so like I said, there are some people that are super believe that everybody should do this. I do it. I don't think you should jump into it. That's why I have a warning. Before anyone wants to jump into making that sort of transition.
Leke, could that matter? Because I have this beautiful thing called flat feet. It sucks.
Right. So there's a whole, I'll talk about resources and for that. There's a whole thing with flat feet too, that it's genetic, right? I have cousins extremely flat-footed. Now, the general tendencies of flat-footed individuals is therefore they have wider feet. Now, flat-footed people already have problems wearing regular shoes with like Nikes. It's never wide enough, right? You see people that, if we're looking at the video, right? If this is the plane of my shoe, have you ever seen somebody that steps on it and it looks like they're stepping on the upper, like they're like stepping on this side of their shoe, like the wall? So like, you know, the walls of your shoe, like, have you ever seen some people that walk? It's because some of them have like a different ankle posture, or their foot cannot be supported in the Nike shoes. And usually those people are out of luck. Now, the challenge is those people don't know that the other side of minimalist shoes are available and can better suit them because they make shoes that are generically wider toe box if they're following the natural principle. So for flat-footed people, a wider toe box would eliminate some of your toe constraint problems, Vincent. But then to like actually get your foot healthier in terms of supporting an arch, some things you can do is standing on the lacrosse ball, getting that midfoot massage and going out. We're not saying you're going to go from flat-footed. Exactly. We're not going to say you're going to go from flat-footed to not flat-footed, but you're just going to support the health of your foot in spite of your condition. So that's primarily what I'm trying to say. It's in spite of your condition, how can we support your health? Some people might might be reversible if you do it long enough. And I'm saying long enough, like 2 years, 3 years, 8 years, right? You've been doing the opposite for 20 something plus years. So trying to fight that is a little harder than that. So that's what I meant by the warning, right? So if you were to transition, does it make sense for you, right? So you have to know why. Why do you want to transition? Vincent mentioned that he has, flat feet. So for Vincent, he might only care about shoes that have a wider toe box from the company just so he can feel like his toes aren't squished. That might be a reason. For example, Zach playing soccer, he might, he's already wearing some sort of this shoe because soccer shoes are thin, right? They just have an upper and a plate and they're essentially minimalist shoes. But from somebody who performs, a sport, he knows that they get tight with their toes. They squeeze, everything is tight in the shoe. And part of, getting comfortable in a tight shoe like that is getting it flexible. So, okay, do I really need to change shoes to get my shoes flexible? Or do I just need to, get like some shoe spacers or put it in hot water or do all the other things? In my case, I had an imbalance. And we're going to do a challenge before. I want us to do a challenge before the time's up. I had an imbalance in the mobility of my toes that eventually traced up all the way to my hips, and several of the issues coming together made that a potentially dangerous situation for me. So the other question is, are you trying to improve your sport performance, right? Are you a runner? Do you want to run in a more effective running position? So maybe a more minimalist shoe will help you do that because it provides less support for you to slowly build up your strength. Or do you just deadlift and you want better contact with the ground and you want some strength? So really understanding why you would want to transition will help you make a slower, effective, purposeful transition and minimize the risk of injuries going through that transition. Because that's really big. If you're transitioning and you face injury and you get set back, it's almost like you're restarting every time. So you don't want to go through a process of restarting back and forth. So that's, have a good one, Tanjeev. So that's one of the main reasons I was saying that. Another part is for bunions, for people that have bunions, it seems like, although it's genetic, there have been a group of people that that the shoes doesn't help their bunion situation, because the way the shoes are designed, like most running shoes, they compress, or regular casual shoes, they compress your toes. Therefore, if we go back, therefore just exacerbating the bunion case, right? They just press, like this can be a function of your shoe. Because of the shape, it tightens and it pushes it this way. So that's just like the disclaimer there with jumping into that. So for a fun foot challenge, I'm gonna bring my phone over and we're gonna look at the other screen. All right, let's see. Is my video on? All right, I'm gonna mute this. Let me mute. All right, can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Good.
All right, sweet. So I'm gonna change. So we're gonna look at my feet now. If you could see my feet, let me know.
Yep.
Oh, great. Okay, so here's the challenge. I'm wearing toe socks, which I generally do these days. All right, there we go. And what you're gonna try to do is you're gonna try to pick up your big toe, right? In my case, pick up my big toe without lifting any of the other four toes. So see if you can do that.
Without using my hands, or
Without using your hand. So this is what you're trying to do. I've got my big toe raised and my other four are down. Now, if you can't do it on one foot, try the other.
I can actually do it in my right foot, but my left foot, I have a turf toe that I ruptured a tendon in that toe. It's pretty weak.
That's a fair assessment. So my PT told me to do this and I couldn't do it. Now try the other way. Try to drop that the big toe into the ground and pick up the other four.
I can do that.
So that's a little more challenging. Now try it on the
Like
on the
impossible.
other
That's
foot.
more challenging because
Or,
I can't.
yeah,
I can't lift my big toe without my other toes.
So people are having different challenges, right? All right. Let's see. So I'm gonna switch back over.
I'm assuming that at least my ability is a function of sports and like being very poignant and changing directions on my big toe, like with wrestling, a lot of lateral movements and like pushing into the ground. Oh, we can't hear you, Leke. You're muted on your desktop.
Oh, right. So yeah, to some extent, like, some of you could only do one of the four, meaning you can only do it on one foot. Some you probably couldn't do two. I couldn't do any of them like 3 months ago. And even now it's still not. But anyway, it's a good exercise just to see the mobility of your foot. And two, it helps you see strength, like which one is stronger than the other, because you can control that one. And it also can tell you which one you probably fire better at. Like your sensory receptors are like have communicated enough with that doing activities so you can fire and execute on that. So what can you do for that? Well, there are some things called toe spacers. Now, for individuals, for example, Zach playing soccer, when he goes to play soccer, he wears tight shoes. He has to. That's all there is on the market. Now, after you're done, you can wear something like this to just kind of, from a mobility perspective, spread those toes out to give it a little bit more room, a little bit more wiggle, so that eventually you have more power and you're able to do more with your toes. Because the fun fact that I didn't mention is our feet has the most sensory receptors in our body. And if you think about what that means, is that the more connection you have to the ground, the more proprioceptal information your body is getting. So if your foot is aware, just think about it. When you step on a rock, you know that you step on a rock. Have you ever stepped on glass and like halfway through stepping on glass, you stopped? Like you didn't even step all the way through, but your body just knew that, oh man, I'm on glass, or I'm on a nail, or I'm on something. So those are some things that I've learned, that I've been practicing. And then we can get into the whole shoe thing a lot later, but shoes with wider toe box, right? This is something for might work better for you, Vincent. It's like it gives your feet enough room. Some people, their pinky toes always get caught up in the edge of shoes. I know I used to have that. And for some people, it's like it's just there's never enough toe room. Now, do you need to go completely flat? No, this has enough cushion support, but it's still a zero drop shoe. Do you need to transition to zero drop? No, you can go minimalist drop. For example, Nike makes what do you call it? CrossFit shoes, or like their trainers. If you look at their trainers, it's different from their running shoes. They have not zero drop, they have like a 3 millimeter drop, which means your heels are a little bit elevated for comfort, but it isn't like a running shoe that's like 8 or whatever. So this is an example of that. Those are resources. And this is an example of a really super minimalist shoe, right? So here's how you tell. Watch. That's the shoe. So made of plastic for a good part of it, super flat, not a lot of cushion, not a lot of support. Should you transition from what you're wearing today to this? Hell no. When do I wear this? When I'm walking short distances. And I've been doing this on and off for a couple of months. So I've transitioned from a more cushion to less cushion, and I go back and forth. What does this help with is the less support you have, the more your body has to rely on its own strength and resources and things like that. These can be great for lifting. If you're lifting and you want flatter shoes and you wear it when you're doing your lifts, right? Closer contact to the ground and things like that. So that's what I wanted to share about, kind of from a top level, high level foot health perspective.
Hey, Leke,
Okay,
real
what are
quick.
those brands of shoes that you just showed us?
Right.
Awesome.
I think that's what Vince was going for.
That was part of it, yeah.
Yeah. So these are ultras.
Okay.
Ultra makes running shoes, and they're pretty much known in the running community. I believe most of their shoes are zero drop, meaning that they're flat. Now, if you're gonna get your first pair, I would get something with a lot more cushion just so you walk around in them. So get you a pair that you can walk around if you're looking into that. But generically, they're wider. If you only care for the wide toe box, they're great for that. The other shoe, the super minimalist one that I had, they were the one that made the video, the Shoespiracy video. This is Vivo Barefoot. So high up, super minimalist. This guy's Vivo Barefoot, not cheap. They're in the Netherlands. I guess when I say not cheap, like most shoes these days cost about $100. So these are 120, 130. There are websites where you can kind of get them cheap, maybe on Amazon, whatever. They use Euro sizing, so that's something to be really um, intentional about. Make sure you know your right Euro sizing before getting most of these shoes, because sometimes they're pretty unique with sizing. I wear 8.5 in Nikes, 8.5 in Ultras work for me. I wear 8, 9, depending on whatever. So these are actually women's 42 in Euro, and I have like an inch of gap. So I'm actually like I'm a men's like 39 is like a snug fit. But I'm wearing a women's 42, and it's a comfortable fit because all I do is walk around in these. So it's like it's fine. So just make sure you don't mess up your size.
Would you say, Leke, the next level up from that type of shoe would be like a Vibram, or what's it called? I think it's Vibram. Vibram.
Yeah, Vibram Five Fingers are on the
I
same
always
level.
thought about getting those. I just never went through it.
They're on the same level. So Vivo is a different company that was going from the more fashionable approach, because I remember seeing Vibrams in high school and
Yep.
nobody thought it was cool. It's like, dude, you're wearing that finger stuff? Like, what the hell? Like, not all their shoes are like finger based, but Vibram is great too. They make minimalist shoes on the same level as Vivo. The reason why the individual toe shoes might be better, depending on what you're trying to achieve, is it still gives your feet more mobility than something that just completely covers your toe box.
Mm-hmm.
So the only advantage that all these other shoes have with the completely covered toe box and not having to do the fingers is they have a wide toe box space. So your toes can essentially move, they're not cramped. But with Vibram, with each finger kind of like in a glove-like thing, each of them has to move. So it's like forcing each of them to move. So that's it's the same difference with a toe sock and a regular Nike sock. If you notice, a lot of Nike socks are like compressed for performance. So they actually squeeze your toe a little bit. If you ever take off your sock and you see a sock line on your leg, you're like, damn, like I was wearing this for 8, 9 hours, feels like blood's been cutting off. But toe socks are a good way to start. Just kind of give your toes a little bit more mobility and playing around with that. The results are your feet's gonna be strong. I met somebody at the gym that had been running in something like that, and she was like, yeah, I got super strong feet. I'm not saying you're gonna have like buff feet like that, dude. This dude has probably been doing this for like 10 years, God knows.
Yeah, those are gorilla feet.
There was a guy.
Like, seriously, that's some serious strength.
There was a guy that a couple years ago, I think, ran the first ever marathon barefoot. And so he's probably got feet similar to what that picture.
And I've been wanting to, as the warmer weather comes, is actually start walking, not like, but like if I go to a park or something, I'm gonna start like going barefoot just to be able to like be grounded with the ground too. I just being with shoes all the time, you don't feel
right. So the philosophy is, if you want to do a high performance activity, it is not encouraged that you just go heel support to no heel support and no cushion. For example, you can go walking on the ground, like you've been doing that since you were a kid, is not like a big deal. It might be nicer to walk on grass.
Yeah.
So yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, Leke, do you know the pronation on those shoes? Is it
Is it what? When you say from,
yeah, so what's the tilt?
it's flat. They're not
Completely
tilted.
flat, it's a neutral?
It's a neutral, yeah.
Okay.
Do you have a foot pronation?
Well, I have a really high arch, which caused me to break one of my left foot.
Oh,
And so now I have orthotics to help support it. But they said basically to make the orthotic work, I need neutral shoes for any
right.
type of shoe. Otherwise, it's just not working. So
Gotcha. Yeah, they're most likely. And the challenge with orthotics too is they should generally be. I have to be cautious here. It's like something you want to wean off of, right? In the sense that like you don't want to use it enough to the point where your body feels like it's dependent on it, but like you want to use it enough whereby you provide the health and the support that it needs so that you're maintaining, like you're going back and forth between this balance. But I sent I put it in the chat. This website is great. They do shoe analysis. They talk about flat feet. They talk about high arches. They talk about, athlete's foot, all these other things, correct toes. And they make some spacers, toe spacers, their company, and they make toe spacers too. I didn't buy their spacers because when I started off, I was like, bro, $50 for something in between my toes. I was like, nah,
Put your
fam.
fingers in there. Okay. Actually, that's a good exercise though, Randy. That's
Yes, it is. If you don't have toe spacers, that's a step down from like just trying to space out your toes. If you can
Right.
reach them, stick your fingers in between and just kind of like move them
And
around
move them,
a little
yeah.
bit, and then wash your hands afterwards before eating.
You don't have to, but it's recommended.
So
it
another
builds the
very
immune system.
supports the immune system.
Oh yeah, getting that foot bacteria and
Oh God. Another interesting one is a not so tough resistance band and put it in between your big toes. So I already cut off line, but without it, so let's say my thumb or my big toes, I would go right now. This is relaxed. I would go and I would just like pull on it
Oh.
with your big toes. You pull on it. Now it seems like this is gonna be painful. Don't do this too long, but just hold it. Here's what I found interesting. Just adjusting my big toes alone when standing, I have found that over like several times, about 3 or 4 times, my whole hip is realigned. Like I'm just standing doing this, and I'm just like I just hear pop, pop, pop. I'm like, oh my God. So it's very crazy because a lot of our big toes are bent in. Like your big toe should be more out than bent in. If yours isn't, fine. It's a function of what you do for the most part, right? Sometimes it's just, genetics and whatnot, but most people's toes are, activated inward. So just kind of working it out and getting that mobility into the big toe can help going upward, into your like.
wouldn't that build more of the inward strike or tendency though? Like I in terms of like resistance, because you're literally resisting it from going that way.
I
You know
see
what I'm
what you
saying?
mean. I see what you mean. Yeah, to make it more prone to coming inside. That's a good question. I don't know that I have an answer, which is why I do it more so to force them to stretch because currently they're already prone this way,
Mm-hmm.
right? And me just pulling them this way against each other is just so that they get more range of motion. I don't know if that's gonna make them make like stronger muscles there that's gonna pull it back. That's that seems like a logical argument. I just don't know or have even thought to research it enough to like figure out if that could be a blowback, but you'd have to do that a lot.
Yeah, right. It's if you're frequently doing it, I'm just thinking of like the counteract, because that's where the resistance is really being built up because you're trying to pull them away from each other.
Okay, yeah. Which is where the toe spacers comes as a more effective one, because this is passive. So for example, Vincent, you mentioned you're going on a walk. If you had like a minimalist shoe, you put in your spacers in your toes and you go for a walk. So now that you're actively walking, your feet are getting used to performing the same activity in a slightly different toe position. So now you do that long enough, over a couple of months, now they start to get slightly adjusted with that range of motion, and you can have increased power in terms of like your toes can grip more of the earth.
Yeah. Do you have any real quick, do you guys have any tips on, does anyone ever had like nasty turf toe before? So this was probably 8 years ago, and I'll admit it was during a dance off. And my toe goes straight into the ground, and I just felt just a big sting, and then I started to like move and it kind of popped. So something ruptured, something ripped, and then the next day my whole foot was like almost bruised from this happening. And now that's actually how my ruptured Achilles happened, because of this old injury that I had 8 years ago. When I was playing basketball, my left toe all of a sudden popped again. And I couldn't push off.
That's wild.
So now I can't push off my left foot. If I try to push off my left toe, it pops out again. And it like just like hurts. And now it's almost like a bunion has shaped because of this injury. So I don't know if I should go get surgery on it or at some point, or, because it was years that it didn't pop out. And then all of a sudden, because of this movement that I did, it re-ruptured again. And now it's like once in a while, like even if I'm going up the stairs and I don't put my full foot on that and it's just my toes, it will pop out again. And it's so painful.
Jeez.
So I don't know if I don't know if that's technically turf toe. That's kind of where turf toe happens, but this is like I don't know. I probably should get a doctor to take a look at it, or a podiatrist, to see if it would make sense to even get surgery or not. I don't know, but yeah.
The only thing that I can say that I've done and I've experienced turf toe a lot from being right leg dominant, one from like cutting in football, but then just like a lot of lateral movement with wrestling and like forward drive. So the one thing that I know I have to constantly do, and my foot, it's weird, not weird, but like I constantly feel like my big toe is actually being pulled upward. Like that's the state that I live in now. And so to counteract that, I don't have a lacrosse ball, but I have like a spiked ball that I'll roll underneath on the base of the foot here to help counteract that. So doing that along with just doing like on carpet, or if you have like a piece of paper or something, and like practice pulling your big toe down inward so that it counteracts just the natural motion of my foot going up like this.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's probably what I would do, is do a lot of PT with my toe, unfortunately.
That's about all you can do.
Right.
I mean, outside of like obviously getting
surgery. Does that really make sense? Because it makes me so mad, because it's like a toe, like a freaking toe. You kidding me?
That's how I felt when I got my Achilles too, Randy. Excuse me, Vincent. So I know how you feel. The challenge is, even if you get surgery, you still have to do the PT.
Correct.
So you're not going to avoid the PT. Now, what I would encourage you to do is go to a PT person and find the right person and start getting in that work. And then if you probably do a CAT or an X-ray or whatever, now your doctor is going to be the guy with the hammer and that only knows how to use it. Oh, it looks like you've messed this up. Surgery, we can got to fix. It's like, oh, great. Yeah, thanks. So they're most likely going to recommend surgery. Now, I don't know what the extent of, how detailed it's gone, But
Yeah.
the other thing is, if you mentioned an Achilles and if you mentioned other foot issues, you probably want to do PT just for those three in general continuously, because what I've noticed is the imbalance that has been created from those injuries take a little bit longer more to balance out, and then to get them right, and then to clean off the imbalances. So you've gone through this injury, for example, when I was on that wheel scooter, my knees still suck today, because like I was kneeling on something for months. And then you start walking and you're walking weird and you have a weird gait. And then you're dealing with that for months. And then you start doing that. So I'm starting running now, and my walking is just getting okay. But I still have like days where I wake up and I feel like my Achilles are just stiff. I'm like, what the heck? Did I freeze it? But so yeah, I would encourage you to find a PT, and you probably want to still like be hacking at it and just getting it. All of these could help in terms of just like strengthening those ligaments around there and giving you more mobility. But it's not, I can tell you, it's not something you're probably gonna feel for at least 4 months.
Right. Luckily the toe, the big toe is on the left foot. The ruptured Achilles is on the right foot. So yeah, it would probably be worse potentially if it was the big toe was the bad one on the ruptured Achilles leg. Because then it's like not strengthened at all, because I can't really push off. Like I wouldn't be able to do. Yeah, it's so weird. Yeah, no, I think that's probably my best bet, because I getting surgery on a big toe just sounds ridiculous.
I told you my friend got it done. It's not pretty. And he is not taking PT seriously, because working, school, newly married, kid.
Yeah.
And he had the surgery done. I was like, yo, like, dude, we've got to like get your foot working. Otherwise, and what tends to happen is, what I've learned is, for example, let's say somebody has something fixed. You're okay now. You can walk around, you think you're fine. And it compounds over 8-10 years. And he's playing with his kid and he's running around and he kicks a ball. Oh, broke this. It's like, how did this happen? Well, we never really fixed the toe. Now you have to do both.
Yep.
So I think, especially for us guys, I think it's super important from like 25 and up. Like that's the whole challenge. Because it's like, I don't know, we've all done stupid stuff, and we've got to like start ironing those out.
Never done stupid stuff. Come on now.